You're back to Hardball. Ohio Governor John Kasich was the last man standing in the Republican primary against Donald Trump. Kasich talked about two paths moving forward politically, one that exploits fear and anger, the other that offers hope. And last April, I asked him to specify who he was talking about. 2 days ago in New York with the Republican Women's Club, you talked about fear and anger out there and how certain candidates opposing you have been exploiting it for their own fame and to gain attention. What were you talking about, and who were you talking about?
Well, I was talking about Trump and Cruz primarily. Do we have problems? Yeah, of course we do. People are worried about their jobs. They're worried they don't have good wages. They put their money in the bank. They get no interest. And what they're really worried about is their kid went to school and is still living with them. Yeah. Can't find a job. You can either get people and drive them into a ditch and feed on their anxiety, gnashing of teeth. You know, this person did this to me, or you can walk into a room and you can acknowledge the problems and you can try to give people an answer. Have a little hope.
Well, Governor Kasich refused to endorse Donald Trump. In his new book, I have right here, great book, Two Paths, he explains why. One of the main reasons, I'm quoting him, I didn't endorse Donald Trump as the Republican presidential candidate after I suspended my campaign was because I couldn't stand in front of Karen and the girls, that's his wife and his daughters, and look them in the eye and tell them I supported this man. I could not condone how he seemed to treat women and immigrants and minorities or the way he looked at the world. Mr. Kasich concluded here, I pushed myself to imagine a future with Donald Trump as president and what it would mean for the soul of this country. So let's talk about it now with you. Thank you. 100 days in, Governor. You're still governor of one of the great states.
Yep.
You went to the Ohio State University.
I did.
Where I was lucky to get a degree, an honorary degree, and I must say, no.
Really? Oh, they gave you an honorary? Oh, you were the speaker,
yeah.
commencement speaker.
Yeah. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
You have to earn these
How'd
degrees.
you do?
I did pretty good.
I'll bet they liked you.
60,000 people. Anyway, let's talk about you. I think you, and I've said this on the show without you blushing here, I've thought you're the perfect alternative to Trump. Because, and I want to say that at the end of the show, there are certain Republican values that are really valuable, even if progressives don't share them. They know they're valuable. Fiscal accountability is a good value for a family, and sometimes it's a good value for anybody in government. Don't spend money you don't have, and don't waste it, and don't cheat, and don't steal, and be accountable for it. Trade is a good thing. It has to be done the right way, but trade's a good Republican value. And I say school choice, too. And some progressives disagree with me, but I had choices in school. I got to go to a Catholic school. I think it's a good thing.
How about immigration?
Immigration. See, these are values, but I think distinctive to the Republicans. There are a lot of Democrats who believe in immigration. Yeah. So are they going to founder now with Trump? Are the good values going to die?
Well,
that path you've taken here?
That's what I warn about, Chris. You can't be in the negative. I mean, look, first of all, to the viewers, I've known Chris for a very long time, and I've always loved him. We've been friends for a long time.
I'm blushing now.
No, we've always been friends for a long time. He worked for Tip O'Neill.
That's where we first met in the 80s.
We first met, and we both have watched the system, and we know that if people can't get along, nothing happens that is sustainable. Yeah. And I mean, they all write about Reagan and O'Neill. They act like they were great buddies. They really weren't great buddies, but here was the thing. They worked together. That's
because
what I
wrote about. I never said they were buddies. I said they worked together and could be friendly, and they were. Yes. They were friendly, actually. But let me ask you about the Budget Committee. You worked on the Budget Committee. In the Budget Committee, in either side, House or Senate, I worked on that as a staffer for 3 years. It is a tough job to say no to some people and yes to others. To carve and say, well, you get $8 million, you get $4 million. Sorry, that's how we got his 12. Trump's tax cut looks like it's easy money. We're going to get rid of the estate tax so people with a lot of money can leave it to their kids can leave it to their grandkids, and we're going to be like Latin America someday with that, where a certain number of families, you can think of the big names now, their grandkids will be zillionaires because the money will just pass down. It will not be equal chance at the starting gate the next generation because there'll be so much money in certain families. The other thing is like getting rid of the alternative minimum tax. At least now our government says, all right, if you've got every loophole in the world, you still got to pay a certain minimum. They wants to get rid of that.
Yeah. Well, what about the debt? I mean, we're $20 trillion, and people somehow are dismissing the debt, that it's like it doesn't matter. The interest on the debt is so big, it keeps us from investing in things like National Institutes of Health. Chris,
tell that to liberals, because they ought to hear that. Because every time you'd say, middle-class family says, what's the government do for me? Well, it provides for the military, Social Security, Medicare, and it pays off the debt. You know, and paying off the debt's a big chunk of your tax dollar.
Yeah, and it doesn't do anything other than pay off a debt when we could take it and use it for certain things.
And you know who gets the money? Older T-bond holders.
Well,
and that's who gets the money. In other words, hardworking 25-year-old, 35-year-old family with 3 or 4 kids, just barely making it by. Their tax money goes to the older couple on Treasury bills. That's where the money goes when you borrow it from the government.
Well, and I know this: when the debt goes up, the jobs go down, and when the debt comes down, the jobs go up. That was that budget deal that I did.
But what do you make of
Clinton.
Trump?
But let me tell you about the tax thing. I never had. I had some of the pro-growth conservatives were furious with me my whole career because I don't believe you just cut taxes and all this magic happens. Now, I do think, Chris, if we cut taxes, you see some improved economic growth. But you can't pay for these massive cuts just out of economic growth. So who's going to pay for it? My daughters. It's not right. Now, I'm not sure this bill's going to go through because here's the thing we have to think about.
Who's going to stop it? The Democrats or the moderate Republicans?
Well, the Democrats have never cared about that. Now, all of a sudden, they say they care about that. And the Republicans...
Will they vote against it?
Wait a minute. So the Republicans say they don't want that, and now they think it doesn't matter. I mean,
Well, what about all these guys you serve with when you're in the House? All these fiscal conservatives, these fiscal hawks. They say, I'm a Republican, and my primary concern is fiscal responsibility. Trump comes along and says free money, monopoly money.
I'm saying it. It used to be that way, so I hope that Republicans will say, fine, we need tax reform, we need lower tax, especially the corporate tax. Everybody ought to
love
agree
that 15%.
The corporate tax is too darn high.
Is this going to bring back the money from overseas? The $30-some trillion sitting overseas because they don't want to pay taxes on it?
You know, I don't know. I mean, that's part of the goal is to get that money back, and then hope that they put. Look, I called one of the Obama people. I said, why don't you give them a tax holiday so they bring the money back? They said, well, if we did that, they might give it back to shareholders. I said, well, that's
I know you're a free trade. You're a trade
thing.
guy and you're a fiscal responsibility guy, and I know a lot of things about it, which I think are, if you were at all middle of the road, you'd say, yeah, I like that. Let me ask you about manners. You were the only guy to get through that Trump jamboree that went on for months without getting a nickname. And he seemed to have avoided you. What was that about? How did you keep him from attacking this into a personal way in that campaign? The other guys were Lion Ted and what is it called? You know, Little Marco, and that, it was very personal. I thought it was high school.
I don't. It was
high school.
You know what? If I acted like that and called these names, which many of them were doing, they'd throw me out of Ohio. I'd have to come, you know, I'd bring my family, we'd live in your porch.
It worked for him. He's the road less traveled by, and he got the votes.
You know, I went to see
He got Ohio.
Oh, I know. I beat him in Ohio in the primary.
Well, how come he got in Ohio? How come he won the general in Ohio?
Well, you know why. Because these people who are hurting were looking for a strong man. You know, it's here. This is why you're being ripped off. I can fix it all, and we all want a pill.
Could you have beaten Hillary?
Could I have? Well, you know what the polls show. The polls show that I won. Yeah, I think
you could have beaten in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what everything looked like, sure.
Do you think Biden could have beaten Trump?
It would have been a very, very interesting race, and I think he could have.
Yeah.
I think he could have. I mean, part of the reason why Trump won is not just because of how he campaigned. I was amazed, Chris, at how many people did not like Hillary. I never talked.
When did you first notice that? Early on or later? I learned it later on.
I think I got it later, too.
You think it was Comey? Did Comey
No,
rip the
no, no.
scab
It was
thing?
even no. I never had anybody walk up to me in the campaign and say, you know what? I love Hillary Clinton. Yeah. The whole time I was running, not one person. Well, and look.
You know, I was sitting in city committee with all the ward leaders the Friday before. I sat with all these 68 ward leaders. And the whole meeting, I was lucky to get Bobby Brady, your former colleague, let me in there to watch it. You know, there's the cameras there. And I didn't hear anybody say anything good about Hillary. Brady said, this guy's not nice to the ladies. You know, he's kind of old school, not nice to the ladies. But that was about the only, there's no positive rah-rah for Hillary. Maybe she's ran too many times. Maybe it's as simple as that.
Well, I think she also was a subject of being demonized for a long time.
That's true.
I mean, in politics, it's not beanbag. It's downright vicious. It's hardball.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.